guys! Welcome to Historical Gossip. In this channel, we do what humans have done best since we've evolved to be a super aware being. Gossiping! Today, we'll explore medieval attitudes towards sex. Sexuality in the Middle Ages, especially in the early Middle Ages, is unfortunately largely unknown to us. There was a vast difference between the literary representations of the Middle Ages and what actually happened in the bedroom. We have few documents that allow us to understand what happened under the bedsheet. Furthermore, the Middle Ages in Europe is a complex period, an era characterized by diverse cultural contributions. The legacy of the Romans, the values and ideals of the Germanic peoples, and most importantly, the influence of a rising Catholic Church. Each of these elements brings with it a different view of sexuality, and for these reasons, some of the curiosities in this video may appear contradictory. We can gradually move from the Greco-Roman antiquity, where the pleasures of the flesh were celebrated, to the Christian Middle Ages, where they were severely condemned. The change had already begun during the 1st century, and Christianity did nothing but extend a model of behaviour that was already in use among the ruling classes. During ancient Rome, marriage for the Romans was an act of conception rather than for entertainment. This certainly didn't prevent the ancients from loving their spouses, but socially, the idea of a happy marriage was very different from ours. Entertainment had to be sought elsewhere in the famous brothels. Under the divine authority, Christianity simply transformed the behaviour of a few Latin aristocrats into a universal law, regulating romantic relationships, condemning abortion, and disapproving homosexuality. Religious institutions made every effort to restrain people's sexual impulses, attempting to limit them, especially in the realm of reproduction. Religious laws prohibited sexual activity during certain periods, and it has been calculated that legitimate spouses had approximately 185 days a year to engage in lovemaking, not counting the impure days of a woman, namely menstruation, pregnancy, and postpartum. A series of rules also limited the days when it was permissible to engage in sexual activity. Not on Sundays, the Lord's Day, not on Fridays and Saturdays, as they were times for confession and preparation for liturgy, not during important Christian calendar periods like Easter and Christmas, and also during Pentecost, the longest recommended abstinence ranging from 40 to 60 days, surpassing even the Pentecost feast itself. A decree by the German canonist Burchard de Worms in the 11th century warned, "Have you coupled with your spouse or another from behind like dogs do? You must do penance for 10 days on bread and water. Have you united with your wife while she was menstruating? You shall do penance for another 10 days with bread and water. Have ye sinned with her during Lent? You must do penance for 40 days with bread and water or give 26 pennies in alms. But if it happened when you were drunk, you shall do penance for only 20 days. Quickies were not considered a sin in early Christian tradition. The concepts of the body and sexual pleasure were not always associated with evil, although making love too often was already seen as harmful in classical medicine. The concept of carnal sin later developed by borrowing from the classical world. In Christian terms, it was once believed that strong emotions and sinful behaviour, often referred to as passions or darkness, were seen as distractions that kept individuals from achieving salvation. The greatest victim of the new sexual ethic was marriage. Even though it could be marked by sin, there were mitigating factors. For example, during the union, the woman remained passive and did not engage in foreplay. For most couples, the relationship was reduced to a very quick and entirely indifferent coitus, with no regard for the woman's satisfaction. The German bishop St. Albert the Great, who died in 1280, took the trouble to compile a list of sexual positions, ordering them from the most sinful to the most appropriate. Here is his ranking. In 5th place, from behind. In 4th, side by side. In 3rd, seated. In 2nd, standing. And in 1st place, the least sinful position, the missionary position. Until the 12th century and sometime thereafter, tolerance increased, but one position remained unacceptable, the so-called erotic horse where the woman is on top. Theologians condemned it, and doctors even considered it dangerous. Sex was to be performed as clothed as possible, while oral sex was forbidden and punishable by 3 years of imprisonment. Adultery was permitted for men, but punished for women. In practice, medieval church eventually came to consider adultery acceptable for husbands, but not for wives. In some regions of Europe, a man was considered adulterous only if he had sexual relations with a married woman, not if the lover was unmarried. A wife who had extramarital sexual relations, on the other hand, was accused of adultery in any case. Chastity was not for everyone. All these restrictions led to the widespread existence of brothels and houses of pleasure, often disguised as public baths. It was fashionable to meet prostitutes in large wooden tubs filled with hot water and then consummate the act on comfortable beds, hidden behind a heavy curtain. And you guys, do any of you and your partners have a love calendar?